Would you like to learn about workplace bullying and what you can do to stop it now? If your answer is a yes, then you've come to the right place. More after this. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inclusive Workplaces with Amara. I am your host, Amarachi Adanaya Igboegwu, and I am so excited to be here with you today. On this show, I share best practices to help people managers create a more inclusive workplace culture. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is so important, workplace bullying. And to help us guide us or guide the conversation today and help us, give us some new insights on how to stop workplace bullying, we have an incredible guest today. Her name is Nikki Air, and I can't wait to introduce you to her. Nikki, welcome.
Thank you, Amara. It's lovely to be here. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you today.
Absolutely, and I'm super excited to have you here as well. And I can't wait to get the ball rolling. Let's just do this, right? Yeah. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well and really excited to have this conversation. But before we jump in, though, Nikki, I definitely want to share with the world the incredible work you're already doing around building awareness around workplace bullying. So Nikki Air is the founder of Conduct Change and an advocate of building a workplace which is psychologically safe, with a particular interest in tackling workplace bullying as part of an overall approach to improving workplace culture and well-being. She offers business consultancy, training, and coaching about workplace bullying. She's dedicated her career to raising awareness on the impact of bullying, as well as offers practical and pragmatic solutions to organizations who want to improve the way they handle bullying and toxic behavior. She is also the chief campaigning officer for the Stop Hurt at Work campaign, which is currently focusing on raising awareness and seeking formal recognition on workplace bullying as a problem that injures individuals and damages organizations. Nikki Air, welcome to the
show. Thank you. That was an amazing introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so Nikki and I are going to be talking about the topic of the day is, stop workplace bullying now, because we know it's so prevalent and we need to address it and, raise awareness around this, because a lot of times people don't even know they're being bullied. I had a conversation with a colleague of mine. She was like, yeah, we really need to talk about this because sometimes we don't even know we're being bullied. And so really excited to start this conversation. But before we go in, though, Nikki, would you like to share how you started this path, like your path to, working in this field?
Absolutely. So as with a lot of people who end up working in this area, I was actually bullied at work myself. So I went through that experience and it was really a challenging time. And it was only kind of afterwards that I realized how much damage it had done to me personally, but also how long it was going to take me to recover. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I discovered was I started learning more about kind of what had happened to me, what workplace bullying was. And I discovered that as I was speaking up about it, then people were more likely to share their experiences with me. So as a coach, that kind of enabled me to sort of talk to people and allow them to explore what had happened and their experiences. And I started off by collecting a few case studies and then doing a few talks about my own experience. Mm-hmm. And I realized that actually there was a huge need for this. And one of the things you mentioned there is a lot of people don't realize that they're being bullied. And actually, I was the same. I didn't realize what was happening for a long time. And by the time I came to report it, I couldn't really articulate what had happened to me. And so, as with most people, it was a failed case. I brought a grievance and it failed. So I think, a lot of people find themselves in that position. And when I started doing the talks and the training, people were suddenly saying, wow, yeah, I've just realized that I was bullied. I never really thought about it like that. Right. And And one of the things is you can have all these lists of different kind of bullying behaviours on a piece of paper, but when people actually talk about them, it brings them to life.
Right.
And so I did basically just kind of grew the business from there. So more coaching with people. I upskilled in terms of the training that I could do, so that it didn't just go from awareness, it went to start looking at prevention.
Mm-hmm.
I've connected with some incredible experts around the world. Do the International Association on Workplace Bullying and Harassment. So I've spoken to psychologists so that we can look
Wow.
at putting together trauma-informed approaches to workplace bullying. I've trained in
Absolutely.
psychological safety. It's absolutely grown from there. And it's really interesting because I've gone from what a horrendous experience to
Mm.
what an incredibly fascinating topic. And if I can
Right.
just pick up on the stop hurt at work very quickly. Sorry, I'll let you
Right.
get a word in a minute.
Go ahead.
The stop hurt at work is actually where we're really starting with that. Is there's no legislation in the UK for workplace bullying.
Right.
And so it's trying to get it actually enacted into law, so to get it defined and put into law,
Right.
so that people have a level playing field when they
Right.
go into a tribunal.
Absolutely. And first of all, I want to commend you, because I think, many people would just, get stuck and just really be devastated by the experience. But I really like how you've kind of turned those lemons to lemonade, and now you're helping so many people out there, helping them cope, helping them also have a more preventive, approach, especially with organizations. So I think you're doing a fantastic job, and I definitely want this to be a good opportunity to share, what workplace bullying is really all about. And already we've got lots of people sharing, so I want to just quickly show you how much people are really enjoying what you're saying. We have Dr. Joseph Adegbuega, who says, "Great idea! What you're doing. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Adegbuega. Thank you." And then we also have Juliet, who says, "Awesome." I think she also works in this field. I know her very well. She's a good friend of mine. So she also knows about trauma-informed work, and this is something that definitely resonates with her. And we have Annette as well, Annette Shaw, who says, "Bullying can be insidious." So true. So I think we're definitely on a good, on a good trajectory here. So very much looking forward to, please keep sending your comments and questions. We're looking forward to having a very engaged conversation. I always love to start with definitions. And I guess the first question, of course, is, what is workplace bullying? Could you share with us what is it really?
Yeah, it's what's really interesting. I just touched on that very briefly there, that there's no legal definition of workplace
Mm-hmm.
bullying in the UK, and
Right.
actually there's no consistent kind of even worldwide
Mm-hmm.
definition of it. One of
Right.
the definitions that tends to be used in the UK is one that was picked up by ACAS, and they use the phrase, "Bullying can be characterised as offensive, intimidating, malicious or insulting behaviour,
Mm.
an abuse or misuse of power through means that undermine, humiliate, denigrate or injure the recipient."
Mm.
Now that definition was used because actually it came from a court case, which was Daniel versus the Secretary of State for the Home Department. I'd love to say that I can remember this. I am actually reading this from a piece of paper. Actually, the judge in that trial, for the first time ever, tried to come up with a definition of workplace bullying.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where that has come from originally. But generally speaking, there's a pattern of behaviour, there's an imbalance of power,
Mm.
and there's some level of harm that is done there as well. I think what's really important is when I'm talking about bullying, I talk about it as a spectrum of behaviours.
Mm-hmm.
And harassment, however you prefer to say it, is, for me, that is bullying, but with a protected characteristic attached to it. So
Mm-hmm.
race, gender, age, disability, all of those kind of things. And that does have a really clear definition. And that is within the Equality Act 2010, and that's unwanted conduct related to a relevant protected characteristic which has the purpose or effect of violating an individual's dignity or creating and intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment for that individual. So that is set in law. And so that is very clear. And that means that when somebody brings a case, then they have a very clear definition to
work from.
Yeah. And they're also protected from, well, they're protected all the time. So if you were going to a workplace, you're protected from the application stage. With bullying,
Great. It's a good thing.
yeah, absolutely, and absolutely essential. But the thing with bullying, when it is not anything to do with a protected characteristic, then actually what happens is you either have to be in your job for 2 years, and then you can bring a case by leaving, and then being able to bring a case for something like constructive dismissal, or it has to be so bad that you have a psychiatric injury, and then you can go through the civil courts. Those are your options. And so
that sounds really difficult.
Anybody in the first 2 years of a job who finds themselves feeling bullied they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Right.
So they have very little comeback at this stage. But essentially what we're looking at is that spectrum of behaviours where there's an imbalance of power, there's a pattern of behaviour, and there's some form of harm that can be done as a result of that behaviour.
Right. And I think we could also add recurring, right? Could it also be recurring when this behavior reoccurs?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it doesn't have to be the same behaviour that occurs. I think for me what's really important is the impact of that behaviour on the other person. Right. So I think that's really, really big. Gosh, we've got lots more comments coming through.
I know, lots of comments said. I want to just highlight some of them here. I have, yes. Oh, Leslie Neidick, she's here. Oh, fantastic. She says, remote workers are also experiencing bullying. Physical distance doesn't stop it. Yeah, so one would think that, in the remote world that would, end workplace bullying, but no, right?
No, it doesn't. And actually it can be even more intense. What you're doing is when you're, if I was on a call with somebody who was bullying me, then you're almost letting that bully into your home. So you haven't even got that, delineation of space at that point either. So the physical space is like they're in your home with you. So really.
Absolutely. And that's even, that's even more difficult to deal with, I would say, when it's in your private space, right? Yeah. And we have Annette Shaw as well. She says, I'm also a life coach helping women who are bullied in the workplace. This is as a result of my own experiences with workplace bullying. You see, it's like, I'm telling you, this thing is, it's quite rampant, actually.
It is.
You'd be very surprised. To hear people's stories, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it's everywhere. It's across every sector, and it's across the world as well.
Right, absolutely. And okay, we have Kai here. She says, leaders have to be aware of their power and what it yields to have inclusive workplaces. Absolutely, Kai. Thank you so much for mentioning that. I think that, this sums it up brilliantly.
Yeah. Can I borrow that?
And Kevin's here too. Hello. Thank you so much for joining in. He's enjoying the conversation. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Your presence, of course, always super awesome. Oh, we've got lots more. Wow, this is great. We have Paige here. Paige McKee, she says, sounds like IPV interpersonal violence. I'm a social entrepreneur working on a large equity project, interested in any research on the links between IPV perpetrators and workplace bullying. Fantastic. Well, this is absolutely great. Thank you so much for joining in. And I think that we can carry that conversation, forward. Absolutely. And I want to turn to some of it's another question. It's just, we've got the definition now, and I'm really curious to know, why does this actually happen? I mean, I would expect that when we hire people through HR, that we're not hiring bullies. I mean, obviously, nobody has "I'm a bully" written on their foreheads, right? So that's kind of hard to determine. But why does this actually happen? What do you think? Yeah.
I think there's a
creates
couple
the
of different
environment.
sides. Yeah, there's a couple of different sides to this. When you hear people talk about workplace bullying, they'll quite often start recording to people as psychopaths and things like that. And actually, we know that it's a really tiny percentage, about 1% of the entire population are psychopaths.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There is some research that says, that you've got a higher percentage in leadership roles than other roles. But the long and short of it is actually there are a great many reasons why people bully. And it can be that they're struggling themselves, and therefore their behaviour changes.
Okay.
So they lash out at other people. It can be that they have had some sort of trauma in their past life, or happening outside of work at the moment, and that's affecting their behaviour. It may be that they are out of their depth and they haven't had the right training to help them, particularly with things like, emotional intelligence and the real people management side of things.
Right.
But there are a small group of people who are manipulative. They are out to just walk all over other people, and it's very it's egotistical, self-centered. The strongest survive, the weakest can just be walked over, and they will just be out for themselves. So a real lack of self-awareness and empathy for other people in that situation.
Yeah, go ahead. I just want to touch on one thing you mentioned, but please finish. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the other side of that is that we have working practices that actually increase opportunities for bullying. So where there is an overload of work, and we're setting targets that are just unachievable, which is increasing the stress levels of people, and therefore it impacts on the behaviour around them. The people who have no control over their work and their hours, and they're expected to just keep going. The things like the connecting with people out of hours, instead of having the right to disconnect. It can be about whether there is enough support and training within the role. But one of the really key things is, if there is a culture in the workplace where behaviours that could be seen as bullying behaviours are actually allowed to perpetrate, where they are rewarded rather than punished, where people are not held accountable, then that bullying behaviour will persist, basically. And when you go into a new organisation, you absorb some of those entrenched behaviours. So sometimes people take on behaviours because they've absorbed them, and they take them on an unconscious level,
right,
and just gradually change, because that's how they can progress in the organisation.
Yeah,
so they're not even aware that it's happening.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the unwritten code. It's implicit, right? So people they see it and they feel it, and they just repeat it. Actually, I wanted to talk about something, like, kind of go back to what you said about trauma, and how sometimes one of the reasons we have people who have maybe childhood trauma, and the workplace is another area where people do. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. Like your past experiences will impact how you work with people, and so sometimes that could also be trauma. And that's difficult, because how do you deal with people who are carrying trauma in the workplace, who are causing harm?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting one. Paige was talking about kind of interpersonal violence, and when people have domestic abuse at home, and they're coming into work. So for some people, it might be their safe space, but for other people, they might have had, even earlier traumas in their life, and they're bringing that trauma with them. And there could be any kind of trigger in the workplace. It could be somebody that reminds them of the person that has caused them that trauma.
Right.
And so they're reacting to them at an unconscious level without even realizing what it is that's setting off that trigger for them. I think the really big difference is when we talk about trauma in the workplace, like workplace bullying trauma, if somebody has a trauma external to the workplace, when they come into the workplace, then it may be that, something has happened, but you can put support in place and get them, specialist support to be able to help with that.
Right.
When it is workplace bullying trauma, the workplace becomes the traumatizer.
Wow.
And actually what we do is we spend all of our time trying to get the person back to work, stay in work, back to work, all of those kind of things initially. And what we're actually doing is say, could you go back to the source of your trauma, please? So it's really quite a different thing once it becomes trauma in the workplace that is caused by the workplace, which is the result of being bullied.
That's so interesting. I never thought of that. Like the workplace being the traumatizer. I mean, wow. That's really incredible. Because then, obviously I can understand why people wouldn't want to come to work, and maybe they would, take time off and do everything to just avoid being in that space. So that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about the workplace physically being the traumatizer. That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's brilliant, and I hope you're taking notes. I'm talking about people who are watching, and actually have a few comments here. Okay, and I'm not sure has something. She says, "Oh dear," she says, "When I was bullied, my mental health was damaged, and I was diagnosed with depression. I was in the job for 6 months. Even though I reported the bullying and told management I was treated for depression, they still fired me." Yeah, this is another, maybe another reason why people don't even speak up. I would say, or what do you think?
Yeah, the majority of bullying cases are not upheld. When we look at kind of how much bullying there is in the workplace, in the USA, it's supposed to be around 30% of people who've experienced bullying and harassment in the workplace. It's about 27% in the UK. It's, been consistently at that level for years. And what happens is that they've discovered that more than 50% of people don't speak up at all.
Wow.
So they'll either just leave or they'll just put up with it.
Right.
Or the people who do speak up, something like, I haven't got exact figures, but something like over 90% of cases are not upheld. And so why would anybody want to speak up when they discover that actually if you speak up against it, you're usually the person who ends up leaving. You're usually the person who loses your job. You're punished for speaking up. And that is where, you haven't got that psychological safety. And that for me is really interesting when we look at speak up campaigns. And the whole idea of speak up campaigns seems to be, well, if you've got a problem, we'll give you a different way to report it. But when you do report it, the system is still the same at the end.
Nothing changes, yes.
Same. Yeah. So you have to do a lot of work to change working practices and culture in the organisation for a speak up campaign to be effective. Because speaking up should be about being able to bring positive ideas forward as well, not just about speaking up when things go wrong. Let's not wait for it to go wrong and then we'll speak up.
Yeah, I like that. I love what you said. And I kind of, I remember when we first had a conversation, you talked about, being more preventive as opposed to being reactive. And we're going to come back to that later in this conversation. I just want to, we're having lots and lots of comments. So I want to just, highlight some of them. So Akere says, the behavioral climate of the workplace definitely influences productivity and effectiveness. Some organizational leaders believe that bullying gets the job done.
Yeah.
Crazy, but true. Unfortunately, sadly, bullying gets the job done haphazardly when the bullied has no other choice. I mean, this is a great point here. I'm sorry, I think I'm probably butchering her name. Akere, I think. I'm not sure, but I'm sorry. But yeah, this is a great point. Some people feel like, we need to bully people to get the job done. And yeah, this is really...
And it comes back to my one of my least favorite phrases in the world, which is I'm just a strong manager.
Right.
And I always say, who in the room has a certificate in strong management? It's not a real thing, okay? And we talk about it a lot, but actually, to a certain point, you can motivate through fear, but it will be a very short-term gain.
Absolutely.
And the ripple effect of that will be huge. And as Akira, as we're hoping we're saying that correctly, as she said, it is very much about the productivity reduces, the efficiency reduces. There's no discretionary effort from anybody anymore. People will do, what they can to get the job done. But that motivation, the morale in the organisation will absolutely go down. And that will go beyond the team. It will infiltrate into other, places across, because they'll be saying, well, do I want to work for an organisation that allows people to be treated like that? And people will vote with their feet, particularly, with the Great Resignation at the moment.
Oh, absolutely, and that's happening. That's happening definitely. Absolutely, and this is why I think just raising awareness is so important. Just setting setting everything clear and straight. Leading through fear is just the worst kind of way to motivate people. Unfortunately, that happens, but we need to really help change that culture. And it's the culture that actually dictates how leaders treat employees and how other employees treat one another. So it's the culture actually then becomes very toxic when from the very top processes are not put in place to prevent these kinds of behaviors. So I'm going to go back to some of the questions that we have. So I'd like us to talk a little bit about what are some bullying behaviors, because I think that's also very important to address, because a lot of people don't even know when they're being bullied. So what are some things we need to be aware of? Or some behaviors that we need to pinpoint?
Yeah, and so I tend to break them down into physical, verbal, and psychological. And if we talk about physical behaviors, then what we immediately think of when we think about the image of a physical bully is somebody who is perhaps, wants to hit somebody or shake somebody, or they get right in their face and things like that. But there are also some really, really small movements, the kind of the microaggressions, the rolling your eyes, the raising your eyebrows, the glancing at other people as if you're sharing an in-joke and things like that. Or the slightly moving your body language, so you're moving away from somebody, so you just prevent them joining a group or something like that. It can be really, really small behaviours.
Subtle, right.
Yeah, really subtle. And then if we look at kind of some of the verbal as well, shouting, screaming, other kind of the overt behaviours that we associate with bullying. But again, the whispering about people, the starting rumours about them, and things like just not talking to people at all. Or even things like when we start to have those little bits of incivility where we cut people out of the tea room. Somebody says no once and then we never ask them again.
Of course.
Or someone's very quiet in the office and so we don't actually encourage them to join in, or we don't ask them if there's a reason why they're not joining in or anything like that. And so we ostracize people, we isolate them, we push them to one side, and that social pain is incredibly damaging, and can actually be felt in the same way as physical pain in the brain. So it's really powerful. And I suppose the psychological side of things is, particularly we hear the word gaslighting a lot these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not always used in exactly the right way, but the gaslighter is essentially getting you to doubt yourself. So, they'll say, well, you said this, and full well that you didn't, but they've got you convinced that you've said it or you've done it. And they're manipulating your, your whole thought processes until you have such doubt in yourself and your own sanity that you've got to a stage where essentially you can get to a point of psychiatric injury through that as well. So they can take so many different forms, but I think the really key thing is if you can catch them when they are those moments of rudeness, those moments of incivility, and say, I don't find that acceptable, or we as a team have agreed that is not acceptable behaviour. Are you aware that you're doing it? Let's catch them early and not let them escalate into those patterns of behaviour that do the most damage and do the most harm.
Yeah, absolutely. This is I mean, this is so important to know, just because a lot of times people might not know they might not know they're experiencing it, and they might know, but they might not know how to deal with it. They might be confused and devastated, but then still stuck. Like this. What do you call it? The deer in the headlights situation, where you're
Yes,
just literally because you're so shocked, you don't know what to do, right? So it's so important to kind of understand the varying ways that people can, bully
yeah,
others.
absolutely. And there are other kind of work-related practices as well. So, the copying people into emails that don't need to be copied in, or leaving somebody out of them, not inviting people to meetings, and not giving them the information they need to do their job. There are all sorts of kind of, work-related practices like that, as well as kind of the individual behaviours that can all contribute to bullying in the workplace.
Absolutely. We've got a few more comments I'd like to share. We have Thank God. He says, bullying is not what should be tolerated within the workplace environment. It can be traumatizing and contagious. And I think that's important about the contagious part, which you talked about earlier. Yeah, a subordinate that is being bullied and nothing is done can also start to bully others when he or she becomes, a boss. So the cycle of bullying continues. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point you raised there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it is. It's about those entrenched behaviours, isn't it, that people just take on. So definitely. So
yes, thank you. Thank you. Ikere just said, hey, this is how you pronounce my name. Thank you so much. Thank you for
yes,
sharing that. Ikere. Got it. Thank you. Um, thank you so much. And then we have Paige. Paige says, neurodiverse folks experience that shunning and have been sanctioned for not participating in the break room, saying good morning. Yeah. Anyone with differences is at risk of being targeted by the bully, or just a lack of insight. That's also important too, right? What would you say about that?
yeah, it's so important, isn't it? And again, it's about if you have a curiosity about each other, then and a curiosity about different experiences that people have had and different lives, when you actually build that and you start to learn what is normal for somebody in their behavior and what is not normal for them. So if somebody is neurodiverse and it is normal for them to stay quiet, to keep themselves apart until they are ready to come forward, then that is absolutely fine. What if they suddenly, don't come forward at all, stop doing their job and withdraw even further, then that might be the time to say, okay, we've noticed that you've just withdrawn a little bit more. Is there anything we can do to help? What would you like us to do? What can we do to help you in this environment? And I think that's, getting to know people and the strengths that they bring. And it's that, we talk about kind of neurodiversity, but actually, I think diversity is really interesting for me in the workplace, because we quite often get is it just a tick box exercise for people? We're going to have a diverse range of people. Instead of saying, we have a diverse range of people with diverse cognitive diversity, as well as the tick box diversity, if you like. And actually, what strengths and creativity and innovation does that bring? But it will only bring that if you are inclusive to start off with. And the focus for me should always be on inclusion first, and diversity will come as a result of that. It's people will want to work somewhere that is inclusive.
Absolutely.
They won't want to work somewhere that is diverse just for the sake of being diverse.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's the key word. I mean, inclusion, right? So you nailed that in the head. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we should maybe talk a little bit about we've talked a little bit, but I think we could maybe go a bit deeper into the consequences. What are some of the consequences of workplace bullying? I mean, we know people are resigning now, like more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So in terms, from an organizational perspective, the cost of conflict in the UK has been estimated at £28.5 billion a year. That is just over £1,000 per employee. in the workplace. Now that is looking at things like not just your direct costs of, perhaps having to pay somebody off to leave, your settlement agreements, your legal cases. Because actually very few cases get to a court. This is about the loss of productivity, the loss of trust by the workers in the organisation.
Right.
It's about the time spent on trying to sort these things out. It's about the recruiting new people when somebody's left. And actually, it's not just, the bullied individual who might leave or the alleged bully who might leave an organisation, but usually there's at least 2 other people that will leave as well. So that's a huge cost of, absolutely getting, new people in, but training them up and getting them back up to speed as well. But it can also damage your reputation. And if you look at an organisation like Brewdog that was held up as a good model, and now recently having all the publicity that it's had in terms of the way that it's treating its workers, it's lost customers, it's lost stakeholders and investors, and it's lost staff members. That's massive for an organisation, and to recover from that is, really hard to do. From an individual perspective, then the impacts can, they are multiple. There are the psychological impacts, the depression, the anxiety, the panic attacks, all of those things that go with it. The physical impacts as well. So whether that's headaches, tiredness, tearfulness, it can be digestive problems are really common. And,
wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Losing weight or gaining weight is very common as well. We have the behavioural changes. So, we turn to coping mechanisms, and quite often they're not positive ones. So they can be, drinking, smoking, overeating, undereating, things where we feel like, we can be in a little bit control of something, might be the undereating approach. And then basically all of that, what we had so far, we've had psychological, physical, social impact as well. So your relationships break down, not just within the workplace, but actually externally as well. Because one of the key things around workplace bullying is rumination, the going through it in your head
over and over again,
and wanting to talk to everybody about it and wanting to draw people in. Really that really wanting a sense of justice, because feeling that you've been wronged in some way. And then of course the financial impact as well, where you might be off sick, you might lose your job. If people have been severely impacted by workplace bullying, if it has got to trauma, then for some people they will never work again. A lot of people become self-employed, but some people will actually never work again. So then they're, into the benefit system and things like that. So yeah, it's
that's devastating. That is devastating. And I know, in terms of people just taking sick leave as well. I mean, people can take, lots of time off, and that costs. I know in Europe it runs over billions of euros. Absolutely,
definitely. And some people end up on sick leave. They might get quite a good deal to start off with from their employer, or they might have an insurance scheme. But because it has such a long-term impact, quite often that will run out. So
now we've looked at the consequences. I think perhaps we could pivot to what are some things we can do to prevent it. Like, what are some preventive measures that can, that organizations, leaders, people managers can put in place? Stop working bullying.
I think what's really, really interesting for me is that what we have at the moment are a set of processes and policies and procedures which are incredibly damaging, both to individuals and organisations. And at the moment, what we do is if somebody comes forward with a bullying complaint, we will say to them, well, here's the bullying, the anti-bullying policy, and here's our grievance policy as well. So we're automatically pushing them towards going into a formal process, which is where most of the cost is and most of the damage is done.
Right.
What we need to do is we need to turn that around. So we need to actually really focus on prevention and early intervention. The first thing has got to be education. If people don't know what bullying is, how can you stop it? But alongside that, okay, these are your bullying behaviours, but let's, as a group, let's talk about what are the value-driven behaviours that we want to see in the organisation? What conduct do we agree on? And let's hold ourselves to that conduct and agree to hold each other accountable. Let's include those value-driven behaviours in the way that we appraise, supervise, and manage people. So those are really key things. Let's pick up those moments of incivility and rudeness really early on. Let's have facilitated conversations. If you can't have a direct conversation with the person, get someone to facilitate it. And if you can catch it early enough, then mediation by somebody, it might be that you need to go external, can help as well. If it's gone on for too long, that might not be the way forward. Might not be the way forward at all. But, all of these early intervention processes, the conduct agreement, the facilitated conversations, the mediation, coaching. So I will go in and coach people, and it just helps them kind of look inwardly. And I don't focus on the story and what's happened. I focus on the making sure that they feel safe, because that's the first thing that somebody needs more than anything else. They need to feel safe again, because that's what they've lost. They've lost their trust in humanity. And so that's really, really important that they feel safe. So as an organisation, working on psychological safety as well.
Right.
Yeah. So that, we've talked briefly about speak up campaigns there. The psychological safety model that I use is Dr. Timothy Clark's 4 stages of psychological safety.
Yes, very well. Yeah.
With inclusion. And what's really, really interesting is there's 4 stages there. There's inclusion, making people feel like they belong. Then the next stage above that is actually about it's learner safety, so feeling safe to learn about different things in the organisation, which includes the culture. And then we go into contributor safety, where we feel safe to contribute, to do our job, that we can grow and develop in those roles. But challenger safety is the one that's most difficult to achieve, and that's where people will speak up. Where they will challenge the status quo, where they'll say that something's wrong. Right. Now, if you are feeling bullied, the chances are that as it starts, you'll go back down. So you might have been contributing, you speak up and you get punished for it. And therefore you withdraw and you start to go back down that. If it's really bad, you might actually go straight from speaking up to feeling excluded. Absolutely. So you're not even into inclusion, you are feeling excluded. And yet we are asking people who feel excluded to go right to that challenger safety and speak up. And you can't do that. That you are asking them to do something so incredibly risky. Then why would they want to do that? And that's why so many people don't speak up. So you have to build that psychologically safe environment, and it has to be grounded in inclusion. If you haven't got inclusion, then the rest of it doesn't have that really strong foundation to work on. You have to make people feel that they belong, right? That they are part of the bigger organisation. So.
Yeah, we're just trying to write, can I capture some of the things you're saying? I think it's so, a lot of people are really latching on to the idea of psychological safety, and building a psychological safe environment is so integral to building inclusivity and addressing some of these issues, especially when we see bullying and not say anything because we don't want to get, caught in the fray as well. So, people go into the protection mode of, well, I don't want to say anything because if I say something, then maybe I'll get fired, right? So, we need to create a psychologically safe space so that people can challenge the status quo and can speak up and speak to power. So this is a very good point that you raise here. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
A lot of people are commenting. I don't know. Do you want to jump in here real quickly? We have Ike, she says, training and retraining of all staff in an organization on social interaction empathy is essential. And I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying previously around, raising awareness and educating people.
Yes, yeah. And also the emotional intelligence. We talk about, I'm glad you put social interaction and empathy, because we hear all the time about listening with empathy. Yes, but if you don't change what you do after that, then it won't make any difference. So you can listen with empathy, but you need to act with compassion. And that takes it that stage further. And that, for me, is the biggest thing that we need to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're calling that psychological safety everywhere in it. But have a look at the Leader Factor website for the one model that I was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I can just quickly share on the. I can quickly type this up. Actually, I think. Timothy Clark. You can look him up.
Yeah, Dr. Timothy Clark with an E, and it's the 4 stages of psychological safety.
Just look him up online, and of course, Amy Edmondson. You can spell her name correctly.
Yeah,
I think it's an O-M and. I'm sorry if I spelled her name incorrectly. Amy Edmondson, and Timothy Clark. These are 2 scholars in the field that you can definitely follow. We've come close to almost to the end of today's episode. But I definitely, Nikki, I want you to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing. I mean, a little bit more on what you're doing, where people can find you. A lot of people are quite engaged, so they might want to, follow you on LinkedIn. So if you're not following Nikki, like seriously, you have to. If you're in a workplace, if you work if you're in a work environment, if you work in a work environment or in a workplace with people, you're managing people or you're a leader, please connect with Nikki. I mean, we don't want to be reactive. We don't want to wait until something goes wrong. We want to be preventive. We want to already create that foundation. So, Nikki, tell us a bit more about where to find you and what people can do to connect with you.
Okay, so you can find me all over the place. So the website is conductchange.co.uk, and on there you'll find links to the training that we offer around awareness and prevention, but also psychological safety assessments and training in that area as well. I do coaching, so I coach managers in terms of everything from their style and preventing them going into burnout, through to the real intervention coaching when there is a bullying case. But it's all behaviour led, what I do. So, but lots and lots of information on there. And we've also got a resources page on there. So it's got links through to different reports that I found useful. It's got some of the webinars that I've done previously as well. So, go and have a look on there. There's loads of stuff on there. I'm on LinkedIn. So Nikki Air, Conduct Change, and Stop Hurt at Work. I have 3 pages, so you can't avoid me.
Wow.
We're on Twitter as well.
Fantastic.
At conduct_change. So all over the place. We are trying to get the word out as far and wide as possible.
It's absolutely needed. Thank you so much. And I have to tell you, people really enjoyed today's session. I have Ike, she says, I love this conversation. I only wish that it can be implemented here in my country. And gosh, I feel that pain too. I completely do.
Well,
thank you.
There's a lot of people around the world trying to make a difference. So you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. And Annette says, many thanks. Are there any courses I could take? And I think, they can connect with you directly, or you said you also have some webinars that you have out there, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Annette, just connect with, I know we're already connected on LinkedIn, but, just drop me an email if you want to come on any of the training. So So, yeah.
Oh, great talk about a very important topic. Thank you so much, Leslie, for sharing that. Yes, I mean, love the support. Thank you, thank you all. And Ike also says, "Well done." She's a great fan. Thank you so much. Thank you. Gosh, Nikki, this is. I mean, I felt like time just went by so fast.
Did it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's because this is a topic that is so prevalent. And
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we can talk about it, but we really need to put some action points, like you rightly said. Yes, talk about it all you want, but we need to see real action, real plans. To really be more preventive, to have a more preventive stance to bullying. So I have to say thank you for
It is.
wonderful exchange. Thank you so much.
It's much more complex than people realise. So let's all get learning and changing.
Yes. I love that. Let's get learning and changing. Yes, remember that. Let's get learning and changing. Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to end the broadcast. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I will be connect with one another. Let's keep building this community. It's always great to see you all, joining in and sharing. Oh, wow, we've got one last one. I'm not going to let her. I'm definitely going to share what Paige said here before we leave. She says, "So many insightful folks. Absolutely. We can change the world. Many thanks and one love from the US." Oh, Paige, that was lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you all. And yes, until the next show, be well. Thank you so much and goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you.